Hi and welcome to Connected with Melissa J. Scott. Today I'm going to do something a bit different. I'm actually going to interview myself. I'm going to tell a bit of a story. It's quite a personal story, so I'm being pretty brave. I'm doing this off the cuff. Nothing is scripted. I've written my feelings down, and I'm just going to sort of get them across to you in the best way that I can, because podcasting is such a wonderful medium for being honest and raw and real. And while it's great to interview people, I thought from time to time it's good to tell my story too, and particularly to share this particular story because 3 years ago when this happened to me, I looked online for good information and really couldn't find a lot of honest stuff. So I just want to share my story anyway and see where it takes us. So 3 years ago, I got a phone call in the middle of the day. I was working from my home office. I've got a branding and marketing agency, and I was 45 years old. My husband was 48, and it was just like a normal day. He'd left the house that morning. We were all loved up. It had been a pretty nice night the night before, thank God. And it was just the most shocking phone call. It was his work colleague had called. He'd gone, it looked like he'd probably had a massive heart attack, and he was on the ground. The paramedics were working on him. Thank God she called me straight away. And I was on the phone, just sort of trying to understand what the hell was happening, and it wasn't looking good. He wasn't conscious. He couldn't talk. And I was kind of like sort of shouting down the phone, trying to bring him back to life, basically. I didn't know at that point in time that he actually already passed away, but, a whole lot of things transpired over the next few hours. I won't go into the detail of that because that's actually not what this is about. What I want this episode to be about is more about how I responded afterwards to getting the most hideous news of my life. Is that at 45 years of age, my husband had died. He was only 48, and there had been no warnings. Like, he was a big guy, but there's plenty of big people out there, and they don't die. So it was an incredibly shocking, there's nothing, unless you've been through it, there's just nothing like it. It's just an absolute shock, and your body goes into shock, everything about you goes into shock. And then I guess how you respond after that is, you don't know. You can't be prepared. You can't be coached for how to go through that time. So I think that's what kind of led me to going online after that. That first week after you lose somebody is just absolute shock, and you don't know what's happening. You're planning a funeral. Like, I've never even planned a funeral. I didn't even know what to do. So thank God, I had people around me that knew what to do. I had my own 3 children. He had his own 3 children with 2 different mums, and they weren't coping well. And there's all these dynamics going on. His family, of course, weren't coping well at all. No one's coping. Everyone's in shock. And it's really how you process all those emotions at that time and deal with it. It was incredible. So I turned to online pretty quickly as to what the hell to expect out of my life. I just sort of one day I was chugging along really nicely in a loving marriage, and the next day I was a widow, and I was getting invited to widow support groups and organising funerals and just dealing and trying to run a business, and support my family and get back to life as normal as it could be. And just not knowing how the hell to respond or act, or not even knowing what I felt because I was just in so much shock. So anyway, this isn't a podcast about the horror. What I want this podcast to be about is the information that I didn't get when I was sort of looking online, which is that how you deal and how you respond to such an incredible, earth-shattering, mind-blowing time of your life it's up to you. You have choices, and it's okay to make choices that maybe other people don't think is what you should do. Because if there's one thing that I learnt, rightly or wrongly, is that people in Western society don't know shit about how to do grief, and they don't know shit about how to deal with death. So I was dealing with all kinds of different responses from friends, and everybody's shocked, of course, and feeling my shock and wanting to give me love, which is wonderful. But the problem is most people want to give you love in that first 7-day period between the death and the funeral. And then, for the coming weeks after that, your really good friends stick around for that period of time too, and your family. But it's the months after that that are exceptionally lonely and exceptionally hard to deal with, particularly when you can't just fall apart and you can't, you have to get on with life. So it was an incredibly challenging time, and for what felt like to me the longest time, like it was just months and months of just sheer grieving and just spontaneous outbursts of tears and just a lot of being reclusive and a lot of soul searching, a lot of going back through time and a lot of questions. But the happiest thing that I think I did, which I was really happy about now looking back retrospectively, is that I didn't go down the why me path. I had a friend who said to me really early in the piece, why you? It's not fair. It's not fair. Why you? Because I'd been in a long-term relationship beforehand with my kid's dad, and that didn't end really well after 20 years of marriage. It was a pretty ugly divorce. And then I met Steve, and then we just had this wonderful relationship, and it was really joyful and, beautiful blended family. We were doing the co-family thing really well. And it was kind of our time with each other, Neither one of us had that relationship before, and it was our time. So, many friends were saying, why you? It's not fair. And I sort of said, well, thankfully I didn't go into that grief part where you blame and you get angry. And I want to say that too. The 6 steps of grief, what a crock of shit. Like, really, it's not. It's a choice. It's just up to you how you want to respond. You don't have to go into any phases of grief that you don't want to go into. And it's not about blocking and cutting off emotions. It's just, you just have a choice as to how you're going to respond. So if you want to go into a whole lot of hate and a whole lot of depression, you can. It's very easy to. But if you actually want to choose joy and choose strength and choose positivity and choose gratitude, you can. It's your choice. And I think if there's anything that you learn from me talking about this right now, is that it's nobody else's business the way that you choose to live your life in the coming months after dealing with losing a loved one. And I say that because I clearly remember it was about 5 months after Steve had died, and it was really good. Day after day, I was going to work, and I was actually able to live this kind of pretend life with new clients that had no idea who I was and didn't know that I was a grieving widow. And I hate that word widow, by the way. They didn't know any of my past. So I was able just to be normal and just to be a human. And it was a real relief from just being, or a relief or a release, from just being trapped in this grieving stage. But then at night, you'd be at home again and you'd be tired, so you'd just get really lost in the grief. And it was tough. It was a slog, But this is not what this podcast is about. And then at the 5-month mark, I remember my kids, they were at their dad's one night. It was a Saturday night. I'd had the flu for about a month because I just got myself really good and sick. And I was coming out of it, and I walked past the mirror and I looked at myself, and I was 46 then. I just looked at myself. I was like, oh my God, you just can't keep being this person. This isn't you. This is, you can grieve, but you just can't keep being this utterly miserable wrench of a person. So I made a conscious choice that night to pick myself up and brush myself off and be joyful. And when you make a choice like that, I sort of had a bit of a family meeting, and I got Steve's kids around, I got my kids around, and we talked about it. And I sort of said, I'm going to start dating. I'm going to start seeing some people, meeting people, and just feeling human again. And I could sort of see, my kids were really kind about it. They were really good, and his younger kids were good. And I could sort of see, they're a bit sad. I was a symbol. This is the other problem too, when you're a widow, that word again, you're also a symbol of that of that person that died. So people will be really upset with you if you do something that they believe that you shouldn't do, which would be dating, or you might sell a house, or you might move interstate, or you might wrap up a business, or God, you might throw out the clothes too early. You might hang on to the clothes too long. There's a million things that you're going to do wrong in people's opinions, and I say that with inverted commas, because you're not doing it wrong. All you're doing is responding to grief in the only way that you know how, is by making the choices that you need to make to get to the other end, and to keep your sanity, and to keep your soul intact, and to feel like you, and to be able to recover as best as you can. So, I made some pretty clear choices, and I did start dating again, and I met a wonderful man, and we had a wonderful relationship, and that really helped me through the grieving process. And I've had the most transformational growth from the past 3 years that I've ever had in my entire life. And they say that things in life don't happen to you, they happen for you if you let them. So by making the choices that I made, that is exactly what happened. And look, it wasn't a walk in the park at all, because exactly what I said just before did happen to me. I had some horrendous judgments made about me. Some were beautiful and positive, and others were just really very not helpful, not productive, and not kind, and certainly not loving. And it was just people, I understand now, it was just people projecting their sadness and their own misgivings and their own grief onto me, because I was a symbol of Steve, and they wanted me to act the way that they wanted me to act, how they believed that they would act, and they weren't really considering how I would act. And it's an incredibly personal thing, grief. It's so personal, and you never know how you're going to respond. And I know I'll never judge another human again, ever, when they're going through a lot of grief, as to the decisions they make and as to what they do. So by no means was anything smooth sailing in the past few years since Steve passed. It was an incredible amount of guilt that I put on myself, and I got to learn so much about myself. That, they say that you do the most growth and the most learning when you kind of hit rock bottom. So when I had made that choice for joy, it was such a completely alien thing to so many people that a person grieving so hard would flip from grieving to joy, and to choose joy and to follow joy, that unfortunately for me, I wasn't really equipped to deal with the judgment. So I had to go and get a lot of help from counselling and kinesiology and meditation and yoga and running and anything that could help me build up the resilience to being able to cope with that kind of judgment, which I did manage to do, but not after I got a really healthy dose of adrenal burnout, which happened around 18 months after Steve passed away. And that's a really horrendous thing to have happen to you, because you gain weight, you get really sick, like your adrenal glands aren't talking to your body, and you're in this permanent flight or fight state, and it's exhausting. So you're permanently exhausted. It was really hard to run my business. I wasn't sleeping properly. I'd be barely lucky to stitch 2 hours of sleep together. Like I said, gaining weight, horrible temperature fluctuations, and I couldn't concentrate or focus. And I didn't know what was happening to me, and this was going on for months before I sort of sought help. So if anybody is going through a really big grief stage, I would highly recommend that you keep in tune with your body. And if you get any of those symptoms, go to a specialist type doctor straight away, and have that dealt with straight away, because that can just compact your grief and compact all of the things that you're feeling and the judgment and whatever else it is that you're feeling. It can make it so much worse and really compound and make the whole experience worse. I really, really want to share with you the learnings so that you might be able to see some of this in yourself and not go through what I went through, or not have to go to the depths of what I went through, to actually make these improvements in your life, because I would love to have learned these things beforehand, and I wouldn't have got adrenal burnout, and I wouldn't have felt so much guilt. Like, years of guilt really sucks. So what I learned was that I was very codependent, as confident as I was, as much as I projected my independence, and I was independent. I've been the main income earner in my family for nearly nearly 2 decades. And, I had 3 young sons. So, I was a really high functioning woman, but very, very codependent, where I made my partner's dreams my dreams and his happiness my happiness. And I was always living through him rather than living through me, even though I was successful. And this is something that I only have really recently figured out. And it's absolutely mind-blowing to have this learning and to find this out about yourself, particularly when you are high functioning. Because people used to say to me years ago, I had a few coaches that would call me out on it, one business coach in particular, and she said to me, "You don't feel like you're enough." And I just said, "What are you talking about? I'm totally enough," and I got very defensive. But I realized how much I'd been living in like a bit of a false ego. I've been living in a really masculine energy and a real pushing ego, and really forcing and always pushing through things, and not sitting back and just like, being as authentic as I could be, and being as open as I could be, and being less defensive, and just really authentically understanding who I am and being happy about that, flaws and all. Even being able to have made a podcast, I wouldn't have been able to have done that because it just wouldn't have been perfect enough. So therefore I wouldn't have done it. And this holds back business owners and entrepreneurs and business leaders all the time, is because we have this false sense of who we are, and we really want to project this really perfect image to people. And no one's perfect. We're all as messy as fuck. And it's just better if we're vulnerable and share our truth with people. It doesn't mean collapsing and falling about everywhere. And, at no point did I ever lose my shit, ever, in a professional sense. And it's taken me 3 years to even be able to really speak about this, because I feel like now I can speak about it, because I'm not going to break down. I am in a good place about it. And I don't want to be the person that just talks about the experience that I had 3 years ago with my husband dying. I want to talk about the woman that I am now and the things that I learned, and to share that with people. And that's the whole point of this podcast and this whole connection theme, is that it wasn't until I got really deeply connected to who I am, what my purpose is, and what I'm here for, and what I want to achieve in life, and just who I am in my soul. Until you really actually understand what that is, then how can you even possibly connect with the other humans in your life, authentically? And I read this most beautiful thing the other day by, I think his name's Osho, something like that. And it spoke all about how to be truly loved by somebody is when you love yourself first, and you have absolute joy in yourself first, so that if they were to ever leave you or do something wrong by you, or to take that love away from you, that you will be okay, essentially, because you are so centered and grounded in who you are. Like, you would miss them and you would be disappointed, but you are so centrally full of love for yourself, and so content in your own life and your own peace and your own happiness, and you're surrounded by people that fill you, not just one human being, that you would be okay. And what typically happens to people, and what happened to me definitely, is when I lost my husband, I absolutely lost my world. Like, everything that I had decided that I wanted to do in my future was rotating around him. And while that made me a beautiful partner for him, made me a fantastic partner, it wasn't great for me, because then when he died, I was absolutely left reeling, and I didn't know who I was. I lost a sense of everything. Thank God I had my children. But even then, as a mother and a woman, you have to be very careful that you don't just transfer all that love and then just throw it into your kids. And I see this happen a lot with women in divorce and in separation, is that their kids become their life. And I think we need to, men and women, need to be deeply connected to what we are doing and what drives us. Like, yes, it's important to be focused on your family and committed to your family and be doing things for the family unit. But if the worst thing happens and that's all taken away from you, you need to make sure that you're deeply connected to what you're doing yourself so that you don't lose the entire fabric of your life. Because I described it to people when they said, how are you feeling? You must be feeling terrible. And I said, I just feel like I'm not even standing on the ground. I feel like the rug has been pulled out from underneath me and I'm just in free fall. And I feel like every single thing that I've ever wanted in my life, for the future, all our future dreams, it's all gone because I was only going to do those things with him. And I realized they were not things that I would have done myself. So, it takes a long time to get to have a really deep relationship with yourself. And I think we're all in danger of that. The longer that we're in relationships with people, and it's a great thing, I take my hat off to people that are together for a long time. I was with my first husband for 20 years, and most of that was good. But, you need to be continually working on yourself and getting to know yourself and connecting deeply to yourself and making sure that you are living and you have a piece of you for you and that there's always time for you, that you get to know who you are and connect back to who you are. So that's probably the biggest learning that I think I got from this whole, I'd say experience, but that kind of diminishes what it was. So I'm just very grateful that I made some good choices in the initial stages of the grieving, where I was invited to go to a widow support group. And I know that the person who invited me to that group, he had by far the best of intentions, which is really kind. His now wife, was actually identified as a widow. And I think she had extended the courtesy to invite me to the group. But I remember being mortified. And, and if you are a widow now and you are part of one of these groups, and if you enjoy that, honestly, no judgment. Like I said, I don't do judgment. But for me, I knew that was the wrong thing because I knew very much that at 45, I didn't want to just pack it all up and just go on continue on with a relationship with a person that was no longer living and breathing in this world. And that is a massive danger, I think, when you lose something or someone, and this could be like divorce or being rejected by somebody or dying, that you continue living on in the memory of them like in the current time. It doesn't mean, because when you move on from something, it doesn't mean that you forget them or you don't honour them for the rest of your life or that you don't love them inside for the rest of your life, but you just have to continue living. So one of the best decisions I made was not to join that support group because I just felt like I wanted to be as normal as possible and be me as much as possible and not be still going to a support group 5, 6, 7, 10 years later and be struggling with something that happened that I had no control over, and yet I could control how I felt and responded, but I couldn't if I was hanging out with other people and it was all becoming a bit of a story about our pain and our suffering and our uniqueness, because that becomes almost like an addiction. And it's just like depression or alcoholism or something else that you're addicted to. I didn't want to be addicted to my story that I'd had this terrible thing happen to me and now that's who I was. I still just wanted to be me. So there was something in me, thank God, that knew that I still just wanted to be me and go through the grief, go through the process and go through the sadness and the loss, but then come out the other side and choose joy. So I wanted to share these cards with you guys because I'm a bit woo-woo and I pull cards from a bit of a tarot thing every now and again because I do believe in messages and I do believe in signs, and it was really interesting the words that were given to me. So they're so poignant because I sort of like meditated on them and I said, send me a sign, send me something that would be what were the big learnings from this experience. And the first one that I pulled was acceptance. And I 100% knew that card would come out. So acceptance is so important. Like I said to you before, when my well-meaning friend said to me, I can't believe, why would this happen to you? You were so happy. And I think her point is that there's so many unhappy marriages out there. And I actually, on that note, I did actually have a friend come to me a few months later and actually said that some of her friends had said to her who'd heard about my experience that I can't even believe that this was said to me, but they wished it had happened to them because that's how much they didn't like their husbands. It's almost unthinkable to be able to say that, but that is honestly what was said to me 3 months after Steve had passed away. But I digress. So acceptance is so incredibly important, that what happened happened. You don't have to like it or have, or come to deal with it, but you need to accept that it happened and not go down the path of the regret and why me, and go down that path, because that just is a spiral into some real serious misery. So you do need to really accept what happened and find a way then to deal and process with the reality of the new situation that you're in. So my reality was that I was living in a dirty, grey, big house that I was having trouble affording on my own. So, I had to reshuffle things in my business, and I was able to, and my sister moved in and helped pay rent, and, that was a good thing, So you can't make smart decisions when you don't even accept what's happened to you. So acceptance is incredibly important when you come up against a challenge, a massive life-changing challenge. The next thing is surrender. So for a period I surrendered. I interpret that as surrender to your emotions. So for a period I did surrender. Now, I'm not a public crier at all, and I've never cried so much in my entire life in front of so many people. But I would like to think I didn't collapse in a big puddling heap. I surrendered to the feelings, surrendered to the emotions, let it out, poured it out, accepted the situation for what it was, and then picked myself up, brushed myself off, and got on with it again. So you can't be so stoic that you make yourself ill by blocking the emotions. You need to let the emotions out. And so I surrendered to those feelings, and with any challenge, that's what you need to do. And then understanding. So, that's why I turned to online to sort of try and understand what would be a process that I would be going through. What would I be feeling typically? What do other people feel? What do other people, how do they respond? Like, I'm a really physical woman, and I remember panicking, because people were saying to me, oh, it's 2 years, you need 2 years to grieve before you can even think about being with another person. And I would secretly think to myself, but I don't want to wait 2 years. Like, I'm a physical woman. I am a young woman and a fit and healthy woman. I don't want to wait. So, I was turning to the internet to get help, which is maybe even how you've stumbled across this podcast, So just having understanding about what's going on. So I just implore you to get a really good counsellor or a kinesiologist or, an emotional healer or hypnotherapist, whatever it is that you need, that you feel is working for you, turn to that sort of people, that person, and get that understanding. And that's the next card, is wisdom. We don't have all the wisdom in ourselves initially. We actually do, but until you can tap into that and tune into that wisdom, then, you need some support and you need some help, and you really need to talk to people, but not to people that don't know what they're talking about. You really need to turn to some professionals and just get counselling and get support. Whatever it is that you need, try different things. For God's sake, stay healthy, eat really well, stay right away from alcohol, stay right away from people that want to pull you down into the pity, and accept that when you do make the choice that you're ready to pull out of the sadness and actually start to try to find joy, then accept that there will be people along that journey, and it will probably be most likely your partner's family. Accept that they're not going to be kind about your decisions, and it's okay. Don't judge them for the way that they feel, because, and I did fall into that trap. You just have to accept that, and this is where you have to be an incredibly strong human being. You have to accept that they're just doing grief in their way, and they're going to have a lot of their own sadness around it and maybe their own guilt. So you just have to be true to yourself, not see your value in other people, but know your value to yourself as a human, and accept the situation for what it is, and to look after yourself and your immediate family if you've got children, and just do the best that you can, and look for the gratitude every day. I was absolutely like a maniac with gratitude every morning, every night, and every hour in between. I was trying to find things all the time that I was grateful for, and be thankful for what you do have, because you still do have a lot of amazing things, and just be incredibly grateful for those things and hang on to those things and feel those things when it feels like, you know, your whole world's going to cave in. Accept and surrender to the emotions, but don't buy into the stories, and just do the best that you can with what you've got. And grief is so incredibly personal. Try not to judge others if you are watching somebody grieving and you don't agree with what they're doing, because it's just so personal. You don't know what they're going through. No one knows, you know. I hope I never go through it again. I hope you never go through it. But chances are that people watching this will. Life, and this is where we do so badly in the Western world, life is about beginning and endings. And I guess we have this notion that we die and then that's it. But you can still continue having a relationship with that person. It's just a different relationship, and they're in a spirit world. So it just really depends on the afterlife. And I think that would be probably a fantastic guest for me to get, is, you know, I have spoken to different people like mediums and clairvoyants and people with different opinions on what the afterlife looks like. Is there an afterlife? Is there not? Are they spirits? Are they not? You know, do they communicate with us from the other side or not? You know, I'll definitely have a conversation like that if you're interested in that. So that's my story. It's pretty personal. It's pretty raw. I went all over the place. It's completely unscripted. My heart goes out to you if you're going through it right now. It'll get better. It will, but only if you choose it. Just go easy on yourself, I guess, and don't judge yourself as well. You know, I talked about judgment. It's going to come. It will. I guess I fell into the trap of judging myself and letting the guilt get in the way. And then that really played a massive, massive toll on the relationship that I was in at the time, which was really sad because he didn't deserve that. You know, he didn't sign up for any of that. So, you know, love to you all. Thanks so much for listening if you stayed right to the end. And, you know, get in touch if you really need to talk, and I might be able to even point you to a good professional as well to help you out if you are struggling with loss or a big, massive challenge in your life, you know, because we all go through something, and, you know, the more we can collectively share and connect as human beings and help each other and connect to ourselves and find our own truth and find our own way and find our own joy and really, you know, do this thing called life as gracefully as we can, as kindly as we can. So much love to you. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.